Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into the hilarious, incredibly awkward, and honestly highly educational minefield of learning a new language. And we're going to zero in on the beautiful, romantic, and deceptively dangerous French language. Look, if you've ever tried to pick up a second language, you already know the drill. The journey is paved with great intentions and, well, absolute public humiliation. So let's get right into it and learn from the truly spectacular failures of others.
Okay, picture this. It's a terrifying real-world scenario from The Guardian, and it absolutely nails the danger of second language confidence. Imagine you're visiting France. You're having a great time, and you want to bring back a lovely traditional gift for your sweet grandmother. You think, hey, I'll get her some really nice jam, with no artificial preservatives. So you walk into a local store, put on your absolute best accent, and confidently ask the clerk for exactly that. But the clerk just stares at you in pure, unadulterated shock. Why? Well, as language tutor Lindsay Dow brilliantly points out, confidently assuming an English word directly translates to a similar-sounding French word is basically a recipe for disaster. You see, the French word préservatif does not mean preservative. It means condom. So instead of asking for organic jam, you literally just asked a very confused grocery store employee for a box of prophylactics for your elderly grandmother. Talk about the ultimate linguistic trap. That perfectly brings us to our first section, beware of false friends. Let's unpack the linguistic theory here. Why exactly do our brains trick us into making these horrific mistakes? The phenomenon we just talked about is actually called a false friend, or faux amis in French. Basically, these are words in two different languages that look or sound almost completely identical, but have vastly different meanings. Linguistically speaking, this usually happens because of shared etymologies. So words that started from the exact same root thousands of years ago, but just evolved in totally different directions over time. Or sometimes it's a semantic change, where a borrowed word takes on a completely new restricted meaning. What's wild is how these deceptive words span across multiple languages, acting like hidden tripwires for eager learners. For example, if you try to say you're embarrassed in Spanish and use the word embarazada, well, you just announced to the room that you're pregnant. Or if you hand someone a gift in Germany and literally use the German word gift, you just handed them poison. No joke. But getting back to French, these false friends can get incredibly personal, incredibly fast. Take this wildly common trap from a Reddit thread. You're chatting with a new friend, or maybe a host family. You really want to tell them how excited you are for an upcoming trip or a nice dinner. You do a direct translation in your head and proudly declare, "Je suis excité." And suddenly, the room goes dead silent. Because while you meant to say you're looking forward to something, excité in this context heavily implies that you are physically, sexually aroused. You just made that dinner party so uncomfortable. So the trick is knowing how to navigate around these semantic landmines. As one super helpful Reddit user pointed out, the phrase j'ai hâte is your absolute best friend here. It translates more closely to I have haste or I can't wait. Using j'ai hâte de totally spares you from that highly embarrassing social interaction and keeps your enthusiasm strictly PG rated. Honestly, just consider the excité mistake a rite of passage. We've all been there. Moving right along to Section 2, pronunciation pitfalls and silent letters, we are transitioning from vocabulary traps into the unpredictable chaos of French pronunciation. Because sometimes you know the exact right word, but your tongue completely betrays you. Let's look at an absolute classic. You've just finished a wonderful meal, someone hold the door for you, whatever it is. You want to politely say, thanks a lot, which is merci beaucoup. But as English speakers, we really struggle with the subtle differences in French vowel sounds. A tiny, slight mispronunciation of the oo sound at the end turns beaucoup into beaucoup. So instead of thanking your lovely host, you've just looked them dead in the eye and said, thanks, nice ass. Or think about this fantastic anecdote from a university classroom. A student is playing a game, trying to list beautiful things you might see or feel on a gorgeous spring day. She wants to say love, which is l'amour, but her pronunciation slips, and instead, she confidently blurts out l'amour, which means death. The entire class just stared at her in total perplexity as she accidentally declared her passionate, springtime appreciation for the Grim Reaper. This next story perfectly highlights the sheer danger of rhythm, stress, and silent letters in a foreign language. French relies heavily on a very even rhythm and specific vowel sounds. When you bring those bouncy, heavily stressed English-speaking rhythms into a French supermarket, things get weird fast. One Reddit user learned this the really hard way. He went to a French grocery store looking for macarons, those delicate, colorful little cookies. He couldn't find them, so he asks an employee, "Avez-vous des macarons?" The employee smiles, leads him right past the baked goods, past all the sweets, and proudly presents him with a tin can in the seafood aisle. The can said macaron, mackerel. Because the tourist failed to stress the syllables properly, the clerk assumed he was desperately hunting for canned fish. And the worst part? The tourist was so embarrassed, he actually just bought the fish.
Which brings us to Section 3, Direct Translation Disasters. Trying to map English phrases, idioms, and grammar directly onto French is a massive trap. Just because a sentence makes logical sense in English absolutely does not mean the exact same word order works across the border.
Let's go back to the dinner table. The food was incredible, you've eaten 4 courses, and the host generously offers you more cheese. You pat your stomach and translate the English phrase, "I am full," word for word, announcing, "Je suis plein." According to language tutors in The Guardian, you haven't just politely declined the cheese. In French, être plein is a phrase pretty much exclusively reserved for livestock. You have officially announced to your fancy dinner hosts that you are a pregnant farm animal. The fix here? Learn the whole French chunk, "Je n'en peux plus," meaning I can't take any more.
Syntactic structure is another invisible trap. In English, we naturally swap words around to ask a question, right? "You are coming" becomes "are you coming?" But in everyday spoken French, statements and questions often share the exact same word order. A phrase like "tu veux du pain," meaning "you want bread," only becomes a question through a rising upward intonation at the very end of the sentence. If your voice drops at the end like it usually does in English, you aren't asking if they want bread, you are aggressively commanding them to acknowledge they want bread. And we can't ignore the ultimate social minefield: tu versus vous. English just has you, making things easy. But French requires you to mentally calculate the social hierarchy of every single interaction in real time. Vous is formal, for bosses, elders, strangers. Tu is informal, for close friends and kids. British and American learners often just default to the easier tu for everyone. But directly translating the English you as tu to a police officer, a waiter, or your new boss, it's going to make you look incredibly arrogant and disrespectful. All right, Section 4, Surviving the French Minefield. After all these horrors, pregnant farm animals, canned fish, accidental insults, how do we actually survive these encounters and reach true fluency? A panel of language tutors interviewed by The Guardian gave some seriously excellent actionable steps. First off, stop reading French like it's English. Remember, that last consonant is almost always silent. Second, immerse yourself. Put on the radio or watch TV in the background every single day just to get the rhythm of the language deep into your bones. But above all else, prioritize making real human connections over achieving textbook grammar perfection. If you can make someone laugh in French, your motivation to keep learning is going to skyrocket. I absolutely love this piece of advice from language expert Lindsay Dow. She suggests making little videos or writing sentences down in a private notebook. Why? Because looking back on those hilarious, cringeworthy failures is exactly how you measure your true progress. Every single mistake you make is just proof that you are trying, you're speaking, and you're actively engaging with the world way outside your comfort zone. So, what is your most embarrassing language mistake? As you think back on your own cringeworthy moments, I want you to remember this. Every linguistic landmine you step on is actually a badge of honor. To ever truly master a language, you have to be willing to sound completely foolish first. So the real question is, will you let the fear of a faux pas keep you silent, or will you embrace the chaos of connection? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.